Hi, Lindy. How's it going? Hey, Lindy. It's Lindy, right?
Oh, Lindsay.
Lindsay. We couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again.
Something from a vending machine. Let's see if we can.
Third floor, President's room. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Was Darwin Wrong? This is our third presentation, so we're thankful that you came. And there may be a few people that we know that are still coming, but to honor you guys for being on time, we want to get the program started. My name is Pastor Parnell.Mahoney, and I'm the advisor to our student groups that are hosting this event, which are International Student Outreach and Maranatha Christian Fellowship. And today's presentation, so we already had two presentations so far on biology and paleontology. Today's our third presentation on campus on geology. So was Darwin wrong about geology? And the question that we're asking, the subtitled question that we couldn't fit on our flyer, is lots of time or lots of water? So it's a fascinating lecture today, one of my favorites. And even Mary Jo, even though she presents a lot of the biology lecture, it's one of her favorites too. So that says something. And we have one more presentation that's off campus. That's tomorrow night at our campus church. We have a house church, and we have flyers for that on the back table outside the room. If you would like more details on that, the service is at 7 o'clock. The presentation probably starts at 8. You're welcome to come whenever. We like to have testimony time and worship, and it's a good time. So you're welcome over there. It's at 315 10th Avenue Southeast in Minneapolis. And again, there's flyers back there. I want to remind you that we have our Was Darwin Wrong flyers as well on the table, and the benefit of having a flyer like that, even on the last day, is the QR code. So if you want to go back and review the presentations, the slides, they're all on there, recorded on our YouTube channel. And again, I forgot to mention the title of tomorrow night at our worship service. It's going to be Grand Canyon, A Different View. So that's an exciting presentation too on geology of the Grand Canyon and evidence for creation there. All right, so why are we doing this presentation? Well, I'll mix it up a little bit because Lindy's been here twice already. So what's interesting about this topic today is that in the New Testament of the Bible, there is a chapter, it's 2 Peter chapter 3, and that chapter has a prophetic word about the end times. And that was written, some 2,000 years ago. And in that chapter, we creationists believe that it actually talks about, it talks about the special creation of the world. It talks about the worldwide flood. And it talks about the final judgment. And it says that a sign of the end times is people will deny that Jesus is returning, and they will walk according to their desires and lusts. And it says that they will deny special creation, and they will deny the worldwide flood. That by God's command, a supernatural command from heaven that created the world in 6 days supernaturally and flooded the world very rapidly, the whole world, by his command. And that final command will bring a judgment on mankind in the end, a final judgment. And so that's amazing because we do have that. It's an end times phenomenon of a denial of the creator of the world we live in. It's very common in human history to acknowledge throughout the world, human civilizations have acknowledged the creator. So So it's an end times phenomenon to deny the Creator and the creation of the world. And there's over 200 flood legends around the world, and to deny that there was a flood event in the past. So that's interesting. And what's the significance? Well, significance is that it says they won't be ready for the final judgment, and it says that Christians ourselves, we won't, if we're not informed, we won't fear God and be ready ourselves. It says in that chapter, how ought we therefore ought to live? We ought to live holy and with morals based upon this understanding. When we look at the natural world, these giant formations, they tell us that God flooded the whole world in a judgment on ancient man that was so corrupt. So you can read about that in Genesis chapter 6 through 9, the worldwide flood. Anyhow, okay, moving on. Dave's like, Parnell's taking a lot of time. So I'm not going to talk about what I had presented in terms of my story today, because you guys know that. So you can look at the other videos if you're curious about that, if you're listening online or something. But after these presentations, we think that you'll look at evolution in a new way, and that you will find the evidence for the Bible's account of special creation to be compelling. Today's presentation is an hour, and there's Q&A following. And a little bit about our speakers. Dave and Mary Jo Nutting are founders and directors of Alpha Omega Institute. They've been teaching creation science for over 40 years. And we've been bringing them into this campus for like about 20 years, annually. Dave is an avid fly fisherman. Dave and Mary Jo like hiking. Mary Jo loves her grandkids. Dave doesn't love them at all. And no, just kidding. She really enjoys children, though I can see how much attention she gives to mine when they're staying with us. They both have advanced degrees in math, biology, and geology, and believe in lifelong learning, most of which they say has occurred after they finish university. They both taught at the high school and college level. And I just want to remind you that all 5 of our presentations are live streamed on our YouTube channel through our YouTube QR code on those flyers. So without further ado, please welcome Dave Nutting.
Thank you.
I kind of used the... You have to double check this, Dave. I kind of changed it.
What
but
did you change? That's what I do to Mary Jo just before she speaks. Okay. All right. I'm going to just put this in here. That's why I took this out, so he wouldn't do that. No. All right. Slideshow. Okay, that looks good. That's where I want it. Okay, yeah, we are slideshow. I don't want the hidden slides. Okay, but I'll just go right through them if they are, because they are hidden, believe it or not. Yeah. Okay. Okay, where did Josh go when you need him? No. All right, I'm going to go ahead and let's, all right, so I don't know why, what Parnell tried to do to me. Slideshow from beginning. I think that's it. Okay, this is it. All right, so when you go to the places in geology, one of the most famous places is the Grand Canyon, right? And I had somebody at the program I did last night ask me, well, isn't the Grand Canyon just... Oh, okay, all right, so here's what we got. We see amazing sheet flows at the Grand Canyon. We're going to be talking about that, okay? We're talking about the layers, but that's more tomorrow, okay? Where Parnell is going to direct you, okay? We're going to be talking about that, but we're going to be looking at the Grand Canyon in a little different perspective. And that little bit of a perspective is, was there a little water over millions and millions of years? Or was there a lot of water over a fairly short time? It's two different views of looking at the same thing, isn't it? All right, when we look at that too, what do we do when we see a slide and we see the mountains rose up and the valley sank down in Psalm 104? Some people say the Bible is not a textbook. It's not a science book. Well, wait a minute. Where it touches on science, it's accurate. Because that's what we see exactly in geology, that the mountains rose up and the valleys sank down. So that's what we're going to be looking at right here. We're going to be looking at all different type of canyons this morning, and we're going to see sheet flows and channelized flows. And it's very important to realize that, okay? So now, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and escape this. No, he not only changed the something on there, but he also changed my order or my program. Oh, that's okay. I forgive you. No. I'm going to go File, Open. I was just wondering why it's reverting to the part of the program I'm doing tomorrow. All right. So I want to find that one right here. Okay, from beginning. That's okay. But before I really get started, I want to say that even geology fits into the scenario that Mary Jo has been talking about. And that scenario is in Genesis 1-2. It's the outline of the book of Genesis. In Genesis chapters 1 and 2, what do you see? Creation with amazing kind of design. Absolutely amazing. But you say, wait a minute, it was so well designed, how come we see death and struggle and decay, disease, right? How come? Well, you have to look in Genesis chapter 3, basically. And in Genesis chapter 3, you see a thing called the fall and the death, when Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, and God drove them, the couple out, basically. And then things went from bad to even worse. And God said, stand back. I'm going to cause a flood to happen to wipe the slate clean again. And so, but then what happened after the flood? You have the Tower of Babel and the people groups being separated, various, and going and migrating in various communities, and taking their genetic makeup with them that they had as family groups. And there you can see from this, you can get all the skin colors from blackest black to whitest white in one generation. That's something that Mary Jo mentioned on the very first night. Well, tonight, what's the hero of the plot? Is there a flood? If there was a flood, you don't need those millions and millions of years, do you? If there really was a flood, and you could explain so many of the rock layers by a catastrophic flooding process. And so, a lot of time, or with a little bit of water, that happens to be the viewpoint that is usually presented in most geology classes. But what about the idea that there might have been a lot more water at one time, like a flood, with a very little time instead, say a year? All of a sudden, you have a new perspective, don't you? I remember being at the Colorado School of Mines in Colorado, teaching some engineers, okay, and geologic engineers. And I had one guy tell me up afterwards, he says, you know, if I buy into what you're saying here in your presentation, then I'm going to have to retract virtually everything I've written over the last 25 years. I said, are you willing to do that? He said, I'll have to give that some serious thought. He was at least open, right? That much I can say. But we had another student at the school of mine, basically a student, you might say. This was a professor. We had a student there say, hey, how did Noah get all those stinking animals on board that tiny boat? Well, you see, he's suffering from this idea that the boat was just tiny. Well, it was not. You find the biblical dimensions of this flood in Genesis, don't you? And what do you see? You find out that the ark was pretty good size. In fact, here's a schematic of what it would look like. At least 1.5 and up to 2 football fields in length. Is that a big boat or what? And it turns out that you can put all the animals that had to go on board that boat and use only one of the 3 decks of that ark. All right, so plenty of room. There isn't a problem whatsoever. But anyhow, the flood is one of the most documented biblical events. And in fact, you find out that the New Testament authors accepted it, as well as Old Testament authors. And even Jesus accepted it as fact. Okay? I say, if Jesus wanted to accept it as fact, I ought to too. Okay? I better look at that a bit more closely. Then I look in sciences and I see archaeological evidence of a flood over the world, various places, talking about the same flood. In fact, here you have Mesopotamia, a flood description, parallels the biblical. Sumerian king list names the kings who reigned for long periods of time. Then a great flood came, and then the kings couldn't reign as long. They reigned for a shorter period of time. Well, that actually fits with the biblical context, doesn't it? You know, you look at the patriarchs before the flood, they were around 900 years. Can we really believe that? Well, for me, I look at it and say, I wonder what the conditions were like in order for that to happen. Okay? I don't just dismiss it because people don't live that long today. See, it's a different way of viewing things, isn't it? All right? Then you've got the Babylonian clay cuneiform tablets, and you find out that there's so much consistent with the biblical record that some people say the Bible was borrowed from it. Except for one thing, you've got the problem there that their ark was shaped like a can. How would you like to roll around in high seas for a year in a squirrel cage? That would not be very good. And then you've got more Babylon documents talking about the same flood, including the Gilgamesh epic, which is pretty popular these days. All right? But when you look at the Gilgamesh epic, you find out animals were taken on board an ark. Birds were sent out during the flood. Ark landed on a mountain, and a sacrifice was offered. Does that strike anything as what you read about Noah's flood? Exactly. And so people would say, well, maybe the Gilgamesh epic was borrowed from the biblical account. Well, see, they're assuming that the biblical account is not as old as the Gilgamesh epic. And there's another way of looking at it that is actually older, the biblical account, older than the actual Gilgamesh epic. And here's the clue. In Genesis chapter 1, you read about these are the generations of, then it gives a patriarch's name. What do you think that really means? According to Dr. Henry Morris, who studied that tremendously, he's quite a scholar too, he said that means what? That there was a group of people that were keeping the records, and these are the records that were kept by this one. These are the records that are kept by this one. And they had maybe a dozen of those records kept. So these older records were then assembled together by Moses as the editor, and it became the books of Moses. Now, that does not take away from the inspiration of God for those of you that are wondering about it. It really doesn't. God can be totally involved in that aspect as well. And the Gilgamesh's problem with the shape of the ark, that it's like a cube. You don't want to be floating around in that for a year either. You're going to bounce all over, aren't you? In general, there are 270 flood legends from around the world. 270 from all kinds of continents. And not only that, you find in Echoes of Ararat, this is now a collection of over 300 flood legends. Some of them I would classify as accounts, okay, from just North and South and Central America. Okay, that's a lot of records, all having a common thread spread over the entire North American continent. What does that tell me? There's something valid to all of that, okay? You follow that? That's what I would say. Well, how about in China? You find out the ancient Chinese language is kind of character pictures, aren't they? The character picture for boat happens to be 8 mouths in a vessel. How did they get that? Well, it turns out only 8 people went through the flood. Is that coincidental? Not when you notice so many other characters in the Chinese language, like somebody's going to deceive you. The smaller pictures that make that up is a woman in a garden and a snake. But then this book goes over many other Chinese writings. I have shown it to people who know their Chinese and said, that's right, okay? And I don't know the Chinese myself, but I have to rely on their thing. But there is one thing that's specific about the Bible that you just have to understand, is the detail. Now, there are some Bible college even that says, oh, Noah's flood was just a myth for primitive people who couldn't understand evolution. Well, that sounds good, right? Except for one thing. Look at the detail here. Mythology starts how? Once upon a time in a far distant land, right? Now, this one starts in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month. Boy, that's specific. Now it gives 2 sources of water. On the same day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened. Whoa, 2 sources of water and specific dates. As you read that further, it tells you when the ark grounds on a mountain, specific month and day, when the tops of the mountains were visible. Remember, this is a worldwide flood, okay? Even the tops of the mountains were covered. When the birds were sent out, etc. And you can look at the bottom one. You find out Noah was on that ark for about 371 days. Okay. This flood was not just a little bit of rain, by the way. According to the biblical record, the windows of heaven opened. That was one source. The second source of the fountains of the great deep opening up. Huge water geysers. That could be volcanics. I'm not positive there. But it certainly could be mixed with all that water too. All right? And now we realize that flood was not some local flood. Okay, some Bible colleges and many different skeptics will say, oh, that couldn't have been a global flood. We don't see anything like that today. Well, God promised not to have it again. Okay, that's why you don't see it. But it was a worldwide flood. Why have a huge boat if it's a local flood? Just herd the animals over here a little bit. Why take birds on board the ark? They'd be better off alone. If it's just local, they can just fly 20, 30 miles away, right? And not only that, here's a clincher. Water covers the tops of the tallest mountains. And I run into skeptics and say, oh, now we know this is mythology. Why? Because we don't have enough water to cover the tops of the mountains. True. But how do you deal with it? You have to look at Psalm 104, where it says, the mountains rose up, this is after the flood, and the valleys sank down. That means to me, those mountains weren't as high before the flood as they are after. But when you look worldwide, even Mount Everest, what do you see? Evidence of water-laid sedimentary rocks, okay, even near the top or at the top of the summit, the whole last 1,000 feet of it. And so when you look at the other ones, you see what? Evidence of layering. You see those layers? Let's go to that one. Let me see here. You see the layering here? Again, sedimentary rocks. That doesn't prove a flood, by the way. You just have to understand. All it proves is that mountain was underwater at one time. Okay? Now, according to standard geology, yeah, we believe that was way down below, and then over 300 and 600 million years, it slowly pushed itself up to the present position. That's one explanation, isn't it? Or maybe it happened very rapidly at the time of the flood. It's a possibility, too. Okay, if the mountains rose up, the valley sank down, how much water would we have in order to be able to flood the entire world? This is important. I did the calculations. Let's take a giant iron and let's flatten out all the mountains in Colorado. Okay? So we can flatten those mountains in Colorado. Now, Texas is not the largest state in the contiguous 48, okay? Colorado is. And then we flatten it down, make the whole world like a soccer ball with very little relief. You find out how much water we have on planet Earth. And the water depth would have been up to 1.5 miles deep over the entire world. Geophysicists are realizing, and they're publishing now, that not only that, but under North America alone, there's underneath at the mantle, you might say at the boundary there's a type of mineral called dimwoody. Seems like a funny name, but dimwoody. And it sweats water. And according to the geophysicists there, who've been studying it a lot more than I have, if you look at the amount of water there, in that one mineral, it's a thick layer. There's enough water to cover the entire world by 3 times the amount of water we have today in our oceans. That was just under North America, all right? And so that's some of the latest research that's been going on there, okay? So it's worldwide, not a local flood. The duration of the flood was over a year. What does that mean? Not a local flood. A local flood comes and goes just like that, right? You bet. And then we have that little part of the passage that says, God set a rainbow in the sky just to remind people he will never flood the world again by that type of a flood. Okay, so I think God keeps his promises. We have had a lot of local floods, by the way, okay, even this year, but not one great big global one, okay? So God is keeping his promise as well. Now, when I look at the geologic record, when I look at the layers that you see, one layer stacked on top of another area or layer, I see evidence of the flood. Now, I may not have said that 30 years ago, okay? But I do now because I see the evidence. I see the evidence in the rock layer structure, also in the erosion of it, etc. But what it tells me is that there was a lot more water over the face of the earth in a short period of time. Now, understand one thing. We all have different lenses on, different worldviews. Let's consider our worldviews like lenses. If you're looking at the world through a wall, through a red glass, it looks red. If you look at the same wall through a blue lens, it looks blue. You understand? And if you look at that wall through the eyes of evolution, all you're going to see is evolutionary ideas. Maybe there's a different perspective in all that, okay? By the way, what about continental drift is a question we get all the time. What about continental drift or plate tectonics? Just think about it for a minute. How can you go from one place, let's suppose they were connected there, how long would it take just at 5 miles per hour, or 5 inches per hour. Now that's not very fast, is it? If those were traveling 5 inches per hour, it would only take 4,500 years to put them in their present position, 3,150 miles. That's intriguing, isn't it? Yeah, it doesn't take that long. Now, there is a geophysicist who was considered the top geophysicist in the world, Dr. John Baumgartner. He was being interviewed by Time magazine, and Time magazine found out he doesn't go along with millions of years of geologic history. And they said, huh? What? And he said, tell me what you think. Well, he laid out one of his models that he's been working on as a geophysicist. He actually, you might say, programmed a great big series of computers called the Cray computers, okay? He had that all set out, and he had the computers assign data points all over the world. And then he said, now, what would happen if all of a sudden, instead of the plates going at a little tiny bit, like how fast your fingernail grows, what if something happened that allowed it to speed up a little bit? As soon as you speed it up a little bit, you're going to produce heat. You're going to have lots of heat down into here, which is going to make this more fluid. Oh, now it can go faster. Okay? And that causes even more heat. And goes faster and faster and faster. John Baumgartner's model calls this thing runaway subduction. Once it starts, it doesn't stop. In other words, okay? And you could get the entire oceanic crust subducted underneath the, come back here, what's going on? The entire crust subducted underneath the continental crust. Why does it go down? It's because the oceanic crust is a lot more dense, especially the older crust. It's more dense, and so it dives underneath the continent, okay? That's a known geologic principle. And so as it goes down, now it goes faster and faster and faster. It says, like a conveyor belt. This will keep on going quickly until all the oceanic crust is actually subducted underneath the continent. How long does it take, according to Dr. John Sanford? Not Baumgartner. How long would it take? According to Dr. John, it would only take 1 year total, or even the better part of the year before it settles back down again. Okay? Whoa, that's a totally different view of plate tectonics, isn't it? And it fits with the biblical 1 year for the Noahic flood. But another thing he did say is that the new magma coming up, this is very important, it's coming up. It's not as dense as the old mantle material. It's not as dense when it turns into rock. It'll get denser and denser and denser as you get thousands of years. Okay? So what's happening here? If you find out, if it's not as dense, the mantle is pushing up on it. How much will the mantle push it up? His calculations show that the mantle would be pushed up as much as 7,000 feet. What does that do to you here at the University of Minnesota if that happens? You're done. You're done, yeah, exactly. But not only do you have that, but this is hot. You're going to have geysers all over, giving more steam, more water coming over the face of the earth. This is Dr. John Baumgartner's model, and I think it is a solid model, okay? Well worth considering the potentials of it. And that is called catastrophic plate tectonics. If you want to see what happens with the ocean level rises here. Now you have 7,000 feet of water inundating all of the coastal and a good share of the Americas and other continents in the world. Okay? So you would have that, wouldn't you? All right. You see, there's two different ways of viewing it. Lots of water with a little bit of time, or millions of years of time with hardly any water. I see this particular model of a lot of water, really, should I say holds a lot of water? I think it does. All right, so now, along with that, you're going to see all kinds of tsunamis and things like that. And you're going to see then huge boulders ripped up. Big boulders. Well, guess what? We see that in the geologic record. You look at that big boulder here, about the size of that dump truck, and you say, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. What piled up 600 feet of water-worn boulders like this and all these other ones? Water-worn boulders. If you're on a field trip with me, I'll frequently will stop and say, boulders! Why? Because they're best explained by a lot of water in a short period of time. So we see that. That's what's going on there. In another spot, you see these water-worn boulders in layers. Some of these boulders are at least half, if not the whole size of this Jeep down here. Again, you have high velocity, pulsating currents, and they're deep currents. Otherwise, you can't move that kind of rock, okay? That fits with the flood mechanisms, okay? That's at Split Mountain in California, and I've been there many a time, okay? And here's another spot. In the same area, you see this water-worn boulder material wedging its way into these layers on your right, kind of like a fist coming into a layer cake. Guess what? If this layer cake was in the oven very long, it'd be hard rock. Okay? According to standard geology, there was about 100 million years of history to put down those sandstone layers. Well, guess what? That's not what the evidence indicates. This evidence indicates this was still yet soft, bending the layers this way, bending them up that way. It only takes a few hundreds of years to turn this type of sandstone into solid rock. You follow that? Okay. And so we're looking at evidence of a major catastrophes when we look at that. Okay, Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980. It was a gorgeous mountain, perfect spot to take a picnic, until the mountain began to smoke. It's not good when a mountain smokes. It really isn't. It began to smoke, and then they noticed this mountain was bulging. Kind of like I do if I have too much of Becky's good food. Okay, what happens is it was bulging between 18 and up to 40 feet per day. If you're in Colorado and the mountain next to your cabin is starting to bulge that way, what do? Run! Okay, you better get out of there. And sure enough, May 18th, 1980, that whole flank of the mountain slid down, released the catastrophic volcanic eruption. And basically that's what we're seeing right here. We lost a lot of mountain as it kind of went off to the north, and this big thing, where did all those layers go? Look down here. Look down there. Those are all layers that were put down as a result of a huge landslide right here. But wait a minute, what's this? A big canyon. Do you realize that canyon was not on the map prior to 1980? Okay, so it doesn't take long for canyons to form, does it? I've been told layers take a long time, but that isn't the case if the conditions are right, okay? I've been at the Badlands. They'll tell you, oh yeah, it takes millions of years to put down these layers at Badlands. Well, guess what? What if there's a lot more water? What if there's a huge volcanic eruption? So you ask that, didn't we see that ranger? Didn't we see the same type of layers put down in a very short time at Mount St. Helens, you know what answer you're going to encounter? Well, Mount St. Helens was a special case. Maybe that was too. Okay, it appears to be, huh? They say you can't get this kind of erosional pattern quickly. That takes millions of years to develop. Well, not so. We had secondary steam blasts that actually produced steam pits with the same badland topography. Okay, how long did this one take? One afternoon. That is all. Okay, and then we look at that big canyon. How long does canyons take? Well, this one goes for about 8 miles back there, but it's not on the map prior to 1980. It is there now. And so canyons can happen pretty rapidly, can't they? I like what National Geographic actually said about this clear back in 2000. He said you would expect a hard rock canyon. Did you get the word hard rock? It's not just through mud, it's hard rock canyon. To be thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years old, says Peter Frenzen, monument scientist, but this was cut in less than 10 years. In less than 10 years. Ooh, you would never expect that, would you? He didn't, okay? It does not take long. But you know, we look at the amount of water there. What caused the canyon? It was a glacier up on the summit of the mountain that melted. All the water came down, right? Okay, but now think about it. That's just a little bit of water. What kind of water would you have if you had a global flood where even the mountains were covered by at least 20, 25 feet of water? What kind? What do you have to stop the tsunamis, huh? Nothing. Okay? This is a catastrophic thing happening after this flood, okay? And when you look at it, it's going to cut all kinds of canyons, and then it's going to deposit a lot of mud. Now, here's a principle of geology you can take home. When you see petrified mud, like you do at Bryce Canyon, think flood. Yeah, just think flood. And you probably would be right almost all the time. Okay, this is very pretty mud though, okay? It's a very famous national park. And when you look at it, you see evidence of major erosion, quick deposition. Now let's go to another spot. This is at the Colorado National Monument. It's just right where I live, okay? I live there. When you look at this monument, you see a canyon here. You see these formations, all right? And then I've been told it takes millions and millions of years to form those canyons. But guess what? No, it's the amount of water that's there that's going to tell you how long it took, all right? In fact, when you look over here, you see a canyon within, and this is another canyon inside. A canyon within a canyon. That's the signpost, that's what they call it, okay? What does that tell you? Lots more water, carving that out. And then the water channelizes, and you get the canyon within the canyon. That's basically it. Oh, by the way, I live right down in here, okay? AOI offices are maybe right in here someplace. So we get to view this in our own backyard. Isn't that great? We take a lot of people on tours here because they're so impressed with what they see. A lot of water can do a lot of damage in a short time. This is at Glen Canyon Dam, and they had a problem with the water getting too deep. And it was going to be overtopping the big, huge dam at Glen Canyon. And what's backed up behind it is Lake Powell. It goes for 180 miles upstream. That's a lot of water, right? And they're worried about it, and they finally contained it with, you might say, plywood. But there was one of their tubes that they had to shut down because they noticed the water, instead of being clear behind the dam, it's now looking muddy like sandstone. Okay? Uh-oh. You see mud, think flood. Okay? Uh-oh, that didn't set well with the people there who engineered this whole thing. Within about a half an hour or so, they were able to shut down this overflow tube, and the other tube was able to contain it. And they also put plywood structure, 8-foot plywood, to contain the water coming in as spring runoff, okay? They were able to contain it and save the dam. Oh, if they hadn't have been able to do that, this would have been one wild raft trip down the Grand Canyon, wouldn't it? Oh, yeah. All right, so at this point, you see, the water, what happens is, a lot of water is, it's basically a catastrophic flow, and it caused a lot of what's called cavitation. And that is little, you might say, bubbles, vacuum bubbles are breaking. And when it does that, it actually erodes that particular rock. And it was really happening here. That is a cubic basketball court of material that within half an hour or an hour, totally cleared out, okay? It's amazing. That's just a little bit of water, okay? A little bit of water. Now, let's go to the Pacific Northwest. There you see a place that was an enigma for geology for a long time. Somebody was looking at that, he was a good researcher, and he said, I see evidence of a lot of catastrophic flow here in this area. But they laughed at him, totally laughed at him, okay? And finally, another geologist was working upstream, and he started publishing about shorelines of a lake above Missoula, Montana, 900 feet above. Then all of a sudden, the two of them got together and said, hold on, there was a huge ice dam here, a huge ice dam right here, left over from this glaciation, and the depth right here would have been about 2,000 feet deep. Ice is not the best thing for a dam, okay? No. Finally, the water breaks through and takes out the rest of the dam, goes out, takes Glacial Lake, Missoula, and then Spokane Lake and Columbia Lake, and all that water goes downstream, carving out an area below in this region right here. And that particular area below is at least 200 square miles. Well, it's more than that. It's probably 100 miles by 200 miles. So that's a huge amount of catastrophic drainage. And all that water eventually went into the Columbia River and then left a delta out here in the Pacific Ocean that went for 200 miles. All right? See, now that is not conjecture, it is standard geology today. Look at the signpost talking about the Great Missoula Flood. All right? Anyhow, I can't even draw a picture of that. Okay? I could try, and yeah, but there's a catastrophic thing here. Now, keep in mind, this is flat as a pancake across here, right? What does that tell you? This goes for many, many miles wide, and the depth of that 700 to 900 feet deep. Traveling probably at 65, 75 miles per hour. And it's not just water. After a little bit, water turns to sand and mud and boulders. Great big boulders go down through here. Looking from the air, you see this channel. Right here, you see the water coming across. This is Dry Falls. It was not here before that. But this particular flood cut a whole series of waterfalls all the way into what's called the Grand Coulee. Okay? Anyhow, but you can imagine, this is a big, broad, one channel. There were hundreds of channels carving out canyons. Okay? We know that, okay? Hundreds of channels. This one channel here, you look downstream, and it'll go for 22 miles all the way from this dry falls, they call it dry falls, okay? Because there's no longer any water, all the way to Soap City, Washington. And that's 22 miles away. This canyon is 22 miles long, and it's up to 6 miles at least wide, and 700 to 900 feet deep. How long did it take to make that big canyon? 24 to 48 hours. Got that? That's standard geology right now. That's standard. Huh. But this is only one channel. We're looking at an area of 100 by 200 miles with all kinds of channels. Here's another one of the channels right here, Palouse Falls. It's 180 feet from here down to here. 180 feet. How would you like to kayak it? Somebody did, broke one paddle and lived to tell a story. Okay? I think he was trying for the Darwin Award that year. But regardless, wow. But look at this big plunge pool. As we're looking back at it, that's a big plunge pool for even this amount of water. Well, how much water was going down here at one time? Notice the hillsides. They're all water worn. You catch that? That's all water deposited, water worn. There are all kinds of gravel deposits in here from this huge flood that used to come over the top here. Now, looking downstream, you have a canyon that eventually goes pouring into the Snake River Canyon. Okay? Into Snake River Canyon. And it's 1,300 feet from here straight down into the canyon. How long does it take to make a canyon like that? According to standard geology today, what day? One day, that's all it took. All right, looking downstream from some of these cataracts, you might call, what do you find? Boulders, big boulders, some of them about the size of a house. But look at all these. You've got basalt boulders, which is volcanic deposits, lava, and then you also have granite boulders as well. And if you were to dig down, right down through there, you'd encounter boulders for at least 300 feet. That's the boulders that used to be in some of those canyons, but they're now all the way down there. I think that's amazing. When I see boulders, what do I see? I think flood, don't I? Okay, of course, slide. I see boulders like that, I think flood. All right, and this is in Utah now. This is a long ways from the other one, but look at the size of those boulders. Again, lots of water coming across, but where is this material? It's on top of the canyon. That means the water depth was much greater to move all those boulders. Go to the Twin Falls in Idaho. That's where the Bonneville flood went down. In fact, we'll mention that in a minute. And what did it do? It had strewn boulders all over the top of the canyon. Yeah, that's it. Some of those boulders are the size of the Suburban, okay? And that's our friend Diane Galbraith there. But where do those boulders come from? Well, go to Salt Lake City, look around Salt Lake City, and you see the shoreline of an ancient lake. It's there. You can see it. And that shoreline would have been 900 to 1,000 feet above the Great Salt Lake. Wow, that's a lot of water. And that lake would have covered 1/3 the state of Utah, which is about the same size as Minnesota, okay? 1/3. And that catastrophically drained this way and that way, forming the Snake River Canyon in less than 30 days, okay? And some people say, maybe one day, okay? It's possible too, all right? But you can imagine all of a sudden this lake drains catastrophically, and you have great big canyons formed called the Snake River Canyon. Where are those boulders, by the way? On top of the canyon. And you look on top of the canyon, oh, wait a minute, that means the depth of the water over the top of the canyon was probably several hundred feet above it to move those kinds of boulders. Again, catastrophic flow. And then the whole thing was not just a drainage, that is a canyon that was not there, according to the signpost there. This canyon was not there 30 days before the collapse of Lake Bonneville. It's there now, okay? All right. So, again, look at the great big plunge pool, but look at the amount of water today. That tells you what? There's a lot more water going through here at one time. That's what it tells you. And you go to Siberia, you see the same thing in Siberia. You find an event that they are calling and leaving great big ripple marks as ridges and canyons within 24 to 48 hours. Okay? That's in Siberia. You can look at that in Science magazine. Okay? You can see it. Go to Wave Rock in Australia. It's bone dry today, but you can imagine the amount of water going over that. And it goes for 7 miles this way. And you say, whoa, there's a lot of water going on in Australia. It turns out time is not the hero of the plot. It's the amount of water. The conditions are much more important, aren't they? Yeah, that's what we see. You know, Charles Darwin floated along the coast of South America. He was reading a book by Charles Lyell that influenced him a lot. Charles Lyell talked about slow and gradual processes over millions and millions of years. So he looked at volcanics and said, it takes millions of years. And he coupled the millions of years with this idea of evolution, like changes in finches that Mary Jo talked to you about the first day. Okay, and that was wrong. His observations were wrong. We can get all of these different size and shape beaks quickly. It didn't take millions of years of evolution. But then he looked at volcanic layers and said, millions of years. Wrong. We saw the same type of volcanic layer in one day at Mount St. Helens, didn't we? That's all it takes. And then he took a little boat and went up this particular river. This river is the Santa Cruz River in Argentina. And he said, look at this. Must have taken millions, he said eons of time, to carve through this bluff right here. But you know, he missed seeing some things. You know what he missed seeing? Boulders. My favorite boulders. He was missing those entirely. And in fact, he was missing the fact that up here on top were boulders the size of automobiles. Never went over there. He missed it. And then he missed these boulders down below too. And when you look at these boulders, again, we're looking at catastrophic amount of drainage. They now realize there was a great big lake upstream that catastrophically erupted through a dam and now produced what? Huge boulders downstream. Okay, but he was seeing all that because he was being convinced by Charles Lyell and his interpretation of geology. But there's another method, lots of water in a short period of time. When I look at canyons like that, whether it's a canyon within a canyon, I think flood. I think flood. I think Noah's Ark. I think all that stuff, okay? I have no problem doing that. I go to the Colorado National Monument, and I see gorgeous scenery here. Okay, here it is right here. And the monument is famous. This is one of the big monuments. There's literally hundreds of these things, but standing as a testimony of amazing amounts of flood. Okay? That's what we see. Remember, I live down here, okay, in Colorado. I've been to this area of Utah, and where I'm standing, you look across here, it is 18 miles across. I see evidence of major sheet wash through here. You understand what I'm looking at? I do. I see things like at Lake Missoula. I see the great big dry falls area, and it looks like that, same as this, same as that, but on a grander scale. So what am I looking at? Catastrophic drainage of water upstream that somehow broke through the barriers and all the water came crashing down. Okay? This would have been a great big lake, and we'll talk about the size of that in a little bit. Okay? I see evidence of a flood when I look at that. I see evidence of clean slopes. If this was millions of years, where did all that rock go? It should be choking the canyon, but it's been washed out. Okay? That's what I am seeing. The standard interpretation took millions of years of gradual erosion to carve the big canyon. I say, what if there's a lot more water? Now you can get it done in a short time. And we even have a smoking gun. And there's a lake potential. You see shorelines of a lake up above all the way to Grand Junction, all the way over to Wrightful, Colorado, and Montrose, Colorado. Now, that lake could have catastrophically drained right down here. Now, keep in mind, a river usually goes around a mountain. This is going right through what's called the Kaibab upwarp, right here. Going right through the mountain. What does that tell you? Huge amount of discharge of water all at the same time. Okay? And now, that's all going down to the Grand Canyon. Do you remember that pile of boulders I first showed you about the size of a dump truck? The rock type is of the same type that you find in the Grand Canyon. Okay? It doesn't prove it, but it sure is a good smoking gun. Okay? That's what probably happened. And that would have been a lot of water going down through here, carving out a good share of the Grand Canyon in a matter of moments, not millions of years. All right? So possibly weeks to carve the Grand Canyon. And boy, oh boy, heresy, heresy. Right? No, it's not heresy. It's looking through different colored lenses and seeing a different perspective. All right, I'm going to show you someplace that I'm excited about. I want to take Parnell there and the rest of you guys there too. Okay, we've discovered this material. Here's the Jeep road that you get in on. But look at this bluff right here. All right, do you see that? And then there's another one right here that looks like it has some polka dots on it. All right, let's look at it. You know what those holes are? Those are holes that are 60 feet in diameter, up to 60 to 80 feet deep. And they're not water draining out. It is almost like these holes were drilled. How could you drill holes in sandstone? Huh? Yeah. Yeah, you can put rocks in there. Here's one of them right here. That's a big one. Now there's another spot in the southwest called Cookie Jar Mesa. And it is called an enigma in geology. Again, what do we see? All of these holes look like they were drilled into there, straight down. Now think about a catastrophic flow. There's so much turbulence that's going on there too. And that particular catastrophic flow is going to send great big whirlpools. You get rocks in one of those whirlpools, right straight down it goes. Okay? That's what you're having. And that's what I believe is the explanation for all of these things. That's the explanation for these big holes. And the ones are right close by. It fits. Okay? It fits. And but it needs a huge depth of water. Keep in mind, the depth of water at Grand Junction would have drowned my house to over 1,000 feet. That's a lot of water. and then it goes clear on up into Rifle, Colorado, or into as well Montrose. All of that water catastrophically draining with huge whirlpools carving huge holes. Whoa, that's an amazing thing, isn't it? I'm going to take a field trip there shortly after I get back from this trip. We're going to go to that site, and we're going to let people just look and say, okay, what do you think did this? Okay, and I think it's catastrophic flow that did it, okay? Not millions and millions of years. Here's another way to get a big canyon. Okay, think about an earthquake. There's some big earthquakes lately, aren't there? Think about this earth shaking. And all of a sudden, a crack develops. That's what we see right here. What is that crack going to do? It's going to capture the river upstream, which is now the Gunnison River, but it would, instead of going clear around that way, take a shortcut. Right straight through here. Okay? Again, that's what the evidence seems to indicate. I call it a tear fault. It's not exactly what it is, but it's what I use. Okay? It's a tear fault. The earthquake, crack. Now the water just comes in and cleans it out. Another spot, Sierra Nevadas. What do you see here? You see evidence of catastrophic flow. Kind of leaving this particular formation here, kind of standing in relief, right? Again, so I wonder, it looks like a lot of water went through there. So what did I do? I climbed down into this whole area, and when I climbed down into it, what did I see? Okay, there's a little bit of water today, but then I started noticing this basalt, solid volcanic, that's carved by lots of water in a short period of time. Okay, this is solid basalt. Again, so there's a huge flow that went down through there. By the way, the flow has to stop someplace, right? Yeah, it's not just clear water. It's water mixed with sand, mixed with boulders, mixed with a few cows and some who knows what else, okay? And now, all of a sudden, all of that slurry, like a cement slurry, comes down the stream at 65 miles per hour, cement, 65 miles per hour. I'd say get out of the way. Now, what happens is that cement coats the sides of the canyon. Okay? And this in Death Valley is called Mosaic Canyon as a result of that. Okay? And here's Mary Jo right here. Well, she was looking down through there, and we're finding out, wow, that's a lot of water in a short period of time. Okay? Are you with me so far? All right, let's see. I don't want to go way over again. But, okay. All right. So, now you say, what about radioactive decay dating? Well, we can talk about that if you have questions, okay? But keep in mind, radioactive decay dating is dated, even the recent dome in Mount St. Helens. Here's the dates they got. They knew when it occurred because they watched it cool. But their dates were 340,000, 2.8 million years. Okay, that's way off. Same thing in New Zealand, same thing in Hawaii. Again, they knew when it occurred. They said, oh, that was 3 million to 1 billion years. No, it wasn't, okay? It was not. All right, I'm going to quit there, and but I'm going to make one thing. If rocks of known age give you horrible results, how do you rely on the same methods to give you accurate results in rocks of unknown age? Okay? Very important, right? Yeah. I see evidence of flood so many places. I see evidence of catastrophic burial, okay, like whole clams that are not even disturbed. So that means they were rapidly buried, okay? I see mass nautiloid kills in the Grand Canyon. Again, what does that show you? Catastrophic burial, all right? That's what it looks like right there in the Grand Canyon. This is a book you might want to get. I'll have it over there for you to order it at the campus house, okay? But we see mass burial, all kinds of fish, squished at the same time. We see fish, not a fin out of place, not a fin out of place. It's palm fronds, not any deterioration there. We see that the catastrophic burial was so catastrophic, this one was eating his lunch when both of them got trapped. We can look at the great dinosaur national monument. What do you see? Again, catastrophic burial. Didn't take millions of years to do that, okay? It's definitely well worth looking at in a short time. I'm going to talk in the Saturday night. I'm going to mention these wonderful pancake layers, okay? Because some of them are in the Grand Canyon. So I get hungry when I look at rock layers, okay? I'm a strange geologist. I see rock layers, and I look at pancakes. And these particular pancakes can explain so much more than what we have explained right now, okay, in geology. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. What kind of questions? Carries a certain amount of water, correct? And but look at the channel, the amount of water that had to be carrying was a whole lot more than what we have today. And according to geomorphologist Dr. Dury, 95% of all river and stream channels can't be explained by current processes. And in fact, it needs a huge amount of water to explain what you're seeing. And glaciation does that. Okay? It's I've been at many of the sites that Dury suggests, and no, they're catastrophic changes.
Thank you for that. Can you tie in the local flooding events that you covered with the argument for a global flood? So you gave a lot of examples of large, quick canyons that were miles, 100 miles, wherever, and 1,000 feet deep. You gave a lot of examples of that, which showed catastrophic flooding. But can you tie that in with global flood event? Because those are, while those might be vast and large, how does it relate to the global?
When I look at it, I'm looking at the global flood has two parts. One is in the deposition phase and carving out various things. The other one is as the water begins to settle down. But even then, you have huge amounts of water going downstream. All right? And so after the flood, post-flood, you have amazing amount of water carving out channels. Okay? And
And a lot of that you said, for example, captured in lakes,
which you gave
Yeah.
examples of, that will be
And
an
then
argument
racially
for the source of the
politics,
lakes potentially, would be that flooding, and then those lakes break down and drain rapidly. That was an argument, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened there.
Do you think it all had to be immediately after the flooding event, or do you think it could have been after, like melting after the ice age or
It
something
could
like
have
this?
been melting after the ice
Do you
age.
think that the rock
It's
would
like
have been
Lake Missoula.
too hard to be carved at that point, or would those sedimentary layers still be soft?
No, even hard rock is catastrophically drain free or carved frequently
Okay.
by that amount of water. So it doesn't have to be soft.
That was my
If
question.
it is soft, like butter, carve it right out. But it doesn't have to be. And you can have the glacial ice age. It might occur a couple hundred years after the most of the floodwaters as a result of ice age lakes. And they were huge ice age lakes. It's very important to understand. And I'm going to try to cover that a little bit more when I hit the drainage. Okay? All right. Okay? Yes.
So just to clarify, how long ago did this flood happen?
Okay, just to clarify, how long ago did the flood happen?
In terms of years from today back,
Not millions of years ago.
how many thousand?
We're looking at thousands of years max for the flood and its aftermaths. Okay, that's what we're looking at. And there's nothing in our geology that would preclude that right now,
Is there,
including huge catastrophic lava flows. Some of the lava flows that we see in the Columbian basalts, Deccan Basin in India, those were huge lava flows. And one case, 100,000 square miles. Was that? How long did it take? Doesn't take long. Liquid lava is very fast. Okay, it's moving, it's like liquid water. It's moving very quickly. And so we don't have a lot of time needed for that. I think that, did I answer that?
I was asking if you had like a number.
A number of, so do you have a time?
Approximately 4,500 years biblically. That's from a biblical historical record. And you can't date it precisely according to science without having you have to have something to compare it to. Okay? And the biblical work, again, it was based on historical documentation. And really, otherwise, how else do you date things? You know, and so we can
themselves be older, but still have been moved more recently.
Yeah, except that the dating doesn't really start until they're solidified in space. And so, you know, it's like when you look at things in the known age that contradict the decay methods of dating layers, then you start to go, well, what happened? Why? What's wrong with these layers or this method? The only of the radiometric decay methods that give relatively young ages is radiocarbon. It'll